The tectonic extent, intertectonic, relating to continents and planetesimals, occurring within the extent of the celestial. The regress of the protoplanets as continents governed by plate tectonics. Astrotectonic, relating to atmosphere, lithosphere and hydrosphere of the celestial, occurring or situated within accretion disks comprised of protoplanets system and their planetesimal satellites. Introduction. Whereas the macro is an emergent property of multicellular individuals comprised of organs and organic systems, the mundane is the individual whose social interaction give rise to friend, family, and communities as an emergent property. In this context, the tectonic give rise to physical separation and division. One of the greatest features of the mundane is the capacity for empathy and the desire to protect the many. Preservation of the group is preservation of the self in the cognition of the mundane. There are natural limits on the capacity for the mundane to put the well-being of others before its own well-being. These limits can be defined as an emergent property of the tectonic. As the mundane organize themselves into complex social groups, the natural large-scale topology of environments which support habitats and ecosystems give rise to the tectonic. At its simplest, the tectonic is a physical feature of the ontology, such as mountains, lakes, oceans, valleys, continents, etc. Upon these foundations, single groups or groups of single groups form nations and engage in international interactions. In the original context of Kardashev Civilization Scale, humanity currently fall into the category for our current advancement as a civilized, intelligent, social animal. The tectonic is not the size and complexity of government. The tectonic is the emergence of complex social interaction influenced by the physical interaction of the environment where within the mundane reside. The ontology must have some kind of a foundation. This principle become an awareness of the civilization scale at the tectonic scale. Tectonic filament extent. Plate tectonics and continents. The tectonic is derived from plate tectonics. Plate tectonics is a scientific theory describing the large-scale motion of the plates making up the celestial lithosphere of a world. The model builds on the concept of continental drifts. The celestial is a body of mass whose gravity is sufficiently strong enough for the body to reach hydrostatic equilibrium. That is to say that the force of gravity action on the mass is sufficient to cause the mass, regardless of its chemical composition, to be mostly spherical. Below this mass, large bodies will have an irregular asymmetric shape while still being massive. In this way, the tectonic as an extent is the regress of the celestial. External mundane regress. Country and volcanic islands. A country is a distinctly territorial body or political entity that is a nation. It is often referred to as the land of an individual's birth, residence, or citizenship. Geologically, high island or volcanic island is an island of volcanic origin. The term can be used to distinguish such island from low islands, which are formed from sedimentation or the uplifting of coral reefs. Medial mundane regress, town and city. A town is a sentient sapient settlement. Towns are generally larger than villages and smaller than cities, though the criteria to distinguish between them vary considerably in different parts of the world. A city is a large sentient sapient settlement. It can be defined as a permanent and densely settled place with administratively defined boundaries whose members work primarily on non-agricultural tasks. Cities generally have extensive systems for housing, transportation, sanitation, utilities, land use, production of goods, and communication. Their density facilitates interactions between people, governments, organizations, and businesses, sometimes benefiting different parties in the process, such as improving efficiency of goods and service distribution. Interior mundane regress, hamlet and city block. A hamlet is a small human settlement. In different jurisdictions and geographies, a hamlet may be the size of a town, village, or parish, or may be considered to be a smaller settlement or subdivision or satellite entity to a larger settlement, whereas a city block, residential block, urban block, or simply block is a central element of urban planning or urban design. In context, a hamlet is the smallest unit of urban planning at the lowest efficiency of the utilization of the space. Hamlets are pre-industrial, pre-urban, pre-modern settlements. They lack the technology, logistics, and infrastructure for efficient and effective use of the space, where the rural and agricultural quality of life was the center of settlement and the foundation of society. The space required for a single family settlement in the form of farmhouse and farmland to provide for a single family was equivalent to a modern urban city block, while the two embodied vastly different attributes and qualities. Mundane filament regress, building, wall, and street. Within this ecosystem is the habitat of the sentient sapient citizen, the mythological creature of the tectonic extent. In classic mythology, the tectonic is the domain of monstrous creatures, deities, gods, and goddesses. The tectonic, by its nature and quality, describe extension level events, primordial creatures, monsters, giants, and demigods. The tectonic can refer to the giant monstrous creatures themselves, which are usually depicted attacking major cities and engaging the military or other giant monstrous creatures. The tectonic is the extent of existential crisis. Giant monstrous creatures are simply meant to serve as a metaphor as the emergent quality embodied within the tectonic. The empirical cosmology of the tectonic extent. The tectonic is a regress of the protoplanet. It's anywhere between 10 meter up to 100 kilometer. On the celestial scale, protoplanets are between 100 kilometers to 750 kilometer, body between 750 kilometer and 999 kilometer, and are planetesimals. 1000 kilometer and above is the extent of the celestial. The asteroids, meteoroids, comets, and protoplanets are all tectonics, to include satellites, natural and artificial, which are below the scale of planetesimal. Within the extent of a celestial system, the celestial world is always the largest body, with the smaller masses being defined as its moons. When moons have natural satellites in orbit around them, we call them lunar. Some lunar can fall into the category of planetesimals or protoplanets, but it is not impossible for extremely larger meteoroids, comets, and asteroids to find themselves within the gravitation extent of a celestial system. Although rare-dawn bodies may retain stable orbits, more often than not, however, these objects tend to fall from the heaven and collide with the planet as an extinction level event. The primary extent where within the tectonic are found is protoplanetary disk and asteroid belts, and all comet belts to include Kuiper belts. Within these regions orbit millions of small mass bodies of various chemical composition. Constellation of artificial satellites and or space stations can also form a regress of tectonic scale objects. Rather, these constellations orbit a lunar, moon, or celestial world. The only exception be constellations of artificial satellites and or space stations are specifically designed to directly orbit around a stellar body. In contrast, they are still tectonic in scale, but these satellites and or space stations form the foundation regress of a Type 3.0 stellar extent. The My02cent multiverse cosmology of the tectonic extent. In the context of My02cent multiverse cosmology, the tectonic embodies the existentialism extent and is the scale of whether natural disaster and large-scale catastrophe form its regress. While it's true that for the most part of the tectonic embodies a physical scale of logistic and infrastructure, in essence, the tectonic is about the capacity to identify, address, prevent, and resolve large-scale destruction at the scale far beyond the mundane, but not quite at the celestial scale. The tectonic is world conflicts. It embodied moments when individuals question whether their lives have meaning, purpose, or value, and are negatively impacted by the contemplation. It may be commonly, but not necessarily, tied to depression or inevitably negative speculations on purpose in life, such as the futility of all efforts. If one day I will be forgotten, then what is the point of all my work? This issue of the meaning and purpose of human existence is a major focus of the philosophical tradition of existentialism. The Tectonic Citizen. The mythology of the Tectonic Citizen. Within the context of mythology, the Tectonic Citizen are embodied within the giants and monstrous creatures with prosapiens and sapient intelligence. Giant monstrous creatures themselves, which are usually depicted attacking major cities and engaging mundane military or other giant monstrous creatures in battle. The empirical tectonic citizen. The tectonic ontology is between 1 times 10 raised to the power of 4 to 1 times 10 raised to the power of 1 meter in volume, defined as a regress. While rare, it is possible for a single being to embody as its standard units of measurement less than 1 times 10 raised to the power 4 meters. If a single being's standard units of measurement exceed this, they would manifest as the celestial. At the smallest of scale, a single tectonic being would embody 1 times 10 raised to the power 1 meters in volume if a single being standard unit of measurement is less than or smaller than this, then they would manifest as the mundane. The present state of humanity is within the regress of the tectonic citizen as technology makes communication and connectivity easier, faster, and cheaper. Individual liberty and security goes down while danger and destruction goes up. The vast majority of present-day human society are still dominated by the state of being mundane, while a handful of super elites embody the nature and quality of the tectonic scale. These are the people that labor to preserve humanity as a whole and not just as the community level. Astronauts are by far the easiest member of the tectonic scale, as they regularly interact with astronautical technology. However, meteorologists and astronomers labor daily to protect humanity from cosmological disaster. By far the greatest enemy of humanity rests in the hand of the very military sworn to protect us, a nuclear holocaust. a holocaust that is only a threat by the deliberate action of humanity. Weather and climate, global warming, natural disaster, cosmic events, engineering disaster, artificial intelligence, pandemic, war, economic crisis, and paranormal invasion are all aspects of the tectonic. The technology, logistics, and infrastructure to control and or prevent these things from occurring describes the extent of the tectonic. The My02cent Multiverse Cosmological Tectonic Citizen. Tectonic is an ontology of the contrasting encompassing extent beyond the regress of mundane. The monotheistic God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and present everywhere within tectonic. Tectonic is the extent where within infinite, alternate, or parallel mundane exists. These mundane to include tectonic are equated to being divine entity, inheriting from their nature the maternal attributes of goddesses. The ontology of mundane formed the foundation for the pantheon or polytheism. They are all siblings, sisters, and daughters of their maternal parent ontology, tectonic, where an ontological mundane is a place, a divine tectonic being, governed by tectonic divinity and known as tectonic being, androgynous gods, paternal or goddesses, maternal. Their nature is alternate and parallel to the ontological mundane. The tectonic scale applies to habitats and scale below the smallest of dwarf planets. Tectonic is non-hydrostatic equilibrium. Ecology is the extent of the tectonic as an emergent quality of habitats and habitations giving rise to ecosystems. In My02cent Multiverse Cosmology, the tectonic citizen is embodied in the nature and quality of the monstrous creature which would embody its final form. There is a regress toward that is implied by the tectonic. For the tectonic citizen's dependence on the use of tools is paramount, much like its mundane ancestor. The tectonic allow for a single endowyer to have sufficient power and influence to cause a tectonic level change to the world. The line between the endowyer citizen and the entire community. The endowyer is a regress within is blurred to the point of being completely unrecognizable. The ideal and application to community of a single citizen can influence and change at the tectonic level and beyond. Alternate, parallel, and interdimensional logistics, it is at the tectonic where this would begin to include time travel. The gods and goddesses are said to be supernatural. The demigods and demigoddesses are vastly superior to the mundane beings while being vastly inferior to the gods and goddesses. Beneath them reside the uber and post beings. A regress of the macro and the mundane at their most basic. In essence, the tectonic have the capacity in whatever form it may manifest to transverse through dimension or be themselves trans or interdimensional. Tectonic civilization. The mythology of the tectonic civilization. In both history and mythology, the tectonic was described as paradise, an ideal or idyllic place or state, whereas idyllic, like an ideal, extremely happy, peaceful, or picturesque. If we consider pre-modern sentient sapiens and their dependency on hunting, gathering, agriculture, and manual labor dependent on physical or animal labor, then we can say that convenience is what embodies the tectonic. The story of Zeus and Prometheus is a great example as it predates agriculture and human settlement. Within the story, to paraphrase, Prometheus helped humanity by tricking Zeus to accept food offering that would make the quality of life for humanity much simpler and easier. to include obtained fire for humanity. Within the narrative, these gifts embody the modern convinces from which later civilization will benefit from. The line between the mundane and the tectonic will forever persist, except in the context of the tools and the knowledge to maximize the use of resources to provide comfort beyond basic survival. The empirical tectonic civilization. In history, ancient Egypt is renowned for their capacity to construct the pyramids of Giza. For our modern perspective, it is an impossibility for the Egyptians to do and achieve something which was achieved 4,000 years before humanity as a whole began to record history. During their era, Egypt, with the logistic and infrastructure in place to build the pyramids of Giza, were by definition a tectonic scale civilization. This is due to the fact that most other culture were still mundane scale culture and societies. If we contrast modern society with our modern conveniences against ancient Egypt, the Egyptians that were in their age the apex of civilized society would be defined as mundane, which is what occurs in history classes and anthropology studies at present. This is why the achievements of the Egyptians are misunderstood and underappreciated by modern scholars despite their easily fitting into the category of tectonic scale civilization. The My02cent multiverse cosmological tectonic civilization. Within the context of the My02cent multiverse cosmology, the tectonic civilization doesn't just describe our modern civilization, it describes the relationship between how easy life is for the citizen in relation to its environment. The greatest evidence for the tectonic is the uneven distribution of resources and wealth within and between societies and citizens. Conflicts always exist within the tectonic because the tectonic manifests out of the application of resolving conflicts. Interdimensional and intertemporal logistic is the hallmark of a type 1.99 tectonic scale civilization. While it is true that the tectonic is the prerequisite of the celestial, while the celestial in of itself is not dependent upon the correlative logistic assisted with the interdimensional or intertemporal travel. The celestial is dependent upon the capacity to transcend the limitation of a finite world and expand beyond its natural extent. Moving through dimension as well as through time qualifies as a plausibility for the expansion of a celestial scale civilization. The tectonic embodies a nature and quality as being the foundation of exponential growth while still being synonymous with the inherent nature of the mundane being. In essence, the tectonic is a point of no return from the primal, primitive, and ecological for the mundane as it transcends into the tectonic regress and beyond the mundane extent.